My guest tonight has admitted that he was a former leader of the IRA in Derry. He's currently the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland and one of the best-known politicians in these islands. Martin McGuinness, you're very welcome to Irish TV. James Martin Pacelli McGuinness. Pacelli? Pray tell me. Background to Pacelli.
Well, Pacelli comes from the name of Pope Pius XII, and I was named after him, as I was named after my grandfather, who was James. I don't know how I ended up being called Martin. I could have been called Pacelli, and you could be sitting talking to Pacelli McGuinness now.
Tell me something about the home of Pacelli McGuinness, the home in which you were reared.
Well, I was born in Derry in 1950 and was reared in 5 Element Street in the Bogside. My father and mother were both very devout Catholics. My mother came from outside Buncrana in Donegal. My father was from Derry. He was worked on an iron foundry in Foy Street. There was 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl, in a 2-bedroom house, no bathroom, a scullery as opposed to a kitchen. So very difficult circumstances, but a great home life with 2 fantastic parents.
What about politics in your home? Was politics a factor in your upbringing? Were your parents very political?
Well, they were more religious than political. I mean, ours was a house where the rosary was said every night. We get down on our knees every night of our lives as children and said the rosary. My parents were daily communicants. We went to the retreats. We went to Mass and all of the observances. Politics wasn't such a big issue in our house, although I was very conscious that my mother came from Donegal and her family would have been supporters, I suppose, of Fianna Fáil and then in turn independent Fianna Fáil with Neil Blaney. My father was, he would have voted for the Nationalist Party. Eddie McAteer was the leader of the Nationalist Party, so he would have given his vote to the Nationalist Party as the only party really representing the community that we came from at Stormont.
Your late mother, with whom you had a very close relationship, I'm aware of that. She told me about the day that the priest arrived at your house to report that you had stolen some acid from one of the schools for the making of, I presume, acid bombs. And she was absolutely humiliated, ashamed, she told me, of what had happened. Just take me through that.
Well, this was during the course of the Battle of the Bogside, and effectively the entire Bogside area where I came from was at war with the RUC and with those who were involved in enforcing the inequalities and discriminations that people were being subjected to. So at that stage, a lot of people of my age group were involved in seeking out materials that could be used against the forces of the state. And unfortunately for me, somebody recognised me when we went to try and get some of this material out of, I think it was in Collins College at the time. And then the local priest did arrive at my door to complain to my parents.
What was the impact on you, though? When your parents were visibly so ashamed, how did that impact on you?
Well, I mean, they never told me they were ashamed, but I know that they were annoyed.
Your mother told me she was very embarrassed.
But yeah, it would be an embarrassing situation for them as people who were daily communicants and who were, very fond of the church and, very loyal church-going people. I can understand that.
Did you unilaterally move eventually to the official IRA? Were you encouraged to do that, or what decided for you to go down that road?
No, I think, I wasn't encouraged by my parents or anybody in my home to join any armed organisation. The decision to do that came from myself. And you see, I think what you have to remember is this, is that violence was being used against our community. And it wasn't unusual for young people of my peer group to make conscious decisions as to how they would deal with that. Some people dealt with it in a different way. Some people joined the SDLP. But in the Battle of Bogside, violence was being used by the police. But we used violence against the police because we were determined to defeat them, keep them out of our areas, and to send a very powerful message to London that nothing was normal in the north of Ireland and that something dramatic had to be done to change it.
When you say we were prepared to use violence against the RUC to keep them out of your area,
Yeah.
were you thinking that potentially one of those police officers could be killed in that situation? Did that occur to you when you perpetrated that violence?
No, at that stage I was throwing stones at them. I was throwing petrol bombs at them like thousands of others.
But petrol bombs are killer machines. They're killer instruments, aren't they? They could kill, couldn't they?
Well, but they didn't kill anybody, but they certainly were a deterrent in terms of keeping the RUC out of the Free Dairy area. But I mean, remember at that time we had the sight of 60, 70, 80-year-olds standing at the Free Dairy corner filling milk bottles with petrol and stuffing rags into them to be sent up to the front line. So I think that, from our perspective, we were conscious that what we were trying to do was be a major deterrent to the designs of the RUC who were looking to encroach into the areas that we lived. It wasn't that we had any notion that the actions that we were involved in was going to take anybody's life.
At what point then did you realise that you had affiliated yourself with that which you considered to be the wrong organisation, Republican organisation, the official IRA? And how then did you make the transition from the official IRA to the provisional IRA?
Well, it's on the public record that I did join the official IRA and didn't do much in it, to be quite honest, other than to go to meetings and discuss politics and all of the rest of it. And in the meantime, out on the streets, there was this ongoing battle between the community and the forces of the state. And I decided that I was in the wrong organisation. So I made a very conscious decision to join the Provisional IRA.
Why did you think you were in the wrong organisation? Was it the inactivity, the inaction of the official IRA which was arguing against you at that point in time?
Well, because I didn't see the relevance of the debates and discussions that were taking place behind closed doors against the backdrop of what was effectively a war situation on the streets.
Okay, Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday was probably the bleakest day in your city. Saville said that probably you were armed with a submachine gun, a Thompson submachine gun, but there was no evidence to prove that anything in which you were involved in any way subscribed or contributed to what happened and the behaviour of the soldiers when they shot 13 people dead, 13 innocent people. Was he correct in deducing that you were, on that particular occasion, in possession at some point during that day of a Thompson submachine?
Well, there was absolutely no substance to that allegation whatsoever.
I want to be absolutely clear about this. Are you then categorically refuting any suggestion as imputed in the Saville report that at any point that weekend you were armed with a submachine gun, as alleged?
Well, what I'm saying is that on the day of Bloody Sunday, and this is on the public record, I, during the course of the testimony, made it clear that the IRA had decided that they would not be on the streets on that day and that all their weapons had been moved to dumps. So that's exactly what happened. Now, the difficulty is that someone who was anonymous, who was a British agent in the employ of the British Army, was the person who made that allegation. And I think they made that allegation on the basis of having been told by someone else. So the whole thing was a total and absolute nonsense. But the main thing out of Bloody Sunday for me was, it was a big decision for me to go to the Saville Tribunal. The families had asked people who were in the IRA to consider supporting them by giving evidence during the course of it. So I spent 2 days in the witness box to support the families, telling the absolute truth about what happened. And Lord Saville accepted our testimony. And I think the final judgment that he made, that he didn't hold the IRA in any way responsible for what happened on the day, was as good a vindication as you could ever ask for.
Well, just in conclusion on that point, just to clarify this, you're saying categorically you were not armed at all
Absolutely
on a given
not.
day.
Yeah.
But are you denying that in the environs of that time, maybe 24 hours earlier, are you saying you were not active prior to that day?
Well, the day prior to that was a Saturday. If you're asking me, did I have a submachine gun on the Saturday prior to the Sunday, the answer is no.
Why did the IRA not operate on Saturday?
No, the point was that we were very conscious that there was a very important march, anti-internment march taking place in Derry, to which tens of thousands of people would come. I think something like 30,000 people turned up. And the big question for the IRA in the city at that time was what was the best for the prisoners who were in prison, the fact that there were 30,000 people coming onto the streets, or the IRA is trying to take advantage of that by launching an attack on the British Army. And for me, there was no question of what was the sensible thing to do. And I argued very forcibly that the parade should go ahead, that the IRA should do absolutely nothing. And that's what happened. And Lord Saville accepted that.
Mark McGuinness, you have already stated that your mum and dad were both daily communicants, that you said the rosary every night in your house, that you came from a religious, devout family. How did you square what ensued with all of that as a Catholic? You clearly were part of a killer organisation, the IRA. How did you square that morality within your head of recourse to the application of guns and being a devout Catholic?
Well, I think you have to consider the circumstances that existed in the city at the time. The city was effectively occupied by the British Army. The forces of the state were the B Specials, the RUC. Huge violence was being used against the community. Innocent people were being shot dead. And so I would have felt ashamed if I had not been part of resistance and part of fighting back against the forces of the state. And remember, the forces that I fought against were armed to the teeth with the most modern weapons imaginable. In terms of numbers, far superior forces. So I'm very proud I was part of the IRA in Derry and involved in repelling the designs of British state forces against people who were being treated as second and third class citizens.
That's a fine euphemism you're using for killing people, repelling the forces of armed resistance. How did you feel actually pulling that trigger to kill a soldier or a police officer?
Well, I mean, down the years, you know, I've been involved in quite a number of interviews where questions like this are asked. And for me to give an answer to any of that is to sensationalise
No, I don't want
what
to do
happened
that.
at the time.
I just want to deal with history.
No, but the difficulty is that
I don't want to do that.
you're inviting me to sensationalise.
No, I'm not. I want you to just outline. This is history. We're dealing with history. We very rarely get a chance. I rarely get a chance to sit down with you. I'm just trying to get inside your head because I know you're a very devout Catholic. You're a non-drinker. I respect all that. So this is why I'm very keen to try to understand how you felt when you shot your first soldier or police officer. What went through your head?
Well, I never talk about shooting anybody, but I do acknowledge that I was a member of the IRA, and as a member of the IRA, I obviously engaged in fighting back against the British Army.
No, you mean killing Martin, don't you?
Well, what I'm not going to do is give people a sensational headline by saying on such and such a night I was involved in a gun battle with the British Army and 25 British soldiers were killed. I'm not into that.
All right.
I'm not going to get into that.
Do you ever talk to yourself, though, about the things you did the actual shooting of the people you saw as the enemy. Do you ever talk to yourself inside your head about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, everybody is accountable for their own actions, and everybody has to make judgments based on their own conscience as to whether or not they believe what they're doing is right or wrong. I believed that in a situation where the community that I came from were being treated like second and third class citizens, that I had a responsibility to fight back against it. And I don't apologise to anybody for having done that. I think it was the right thing to do. Now, the difficulty is that we effectively ended up in what was a vicious cycle of conflict, in which an awful lot of people got hurt and an awful lot of people got killed. British soldiers, members of the IRA, innocent civilians, defenceless prisoners in prisons. And, out of that, and of course, we didn't talk much about the civil rights protests because, in the lead into all of this, I had the best education that I ever had in my life. I left school when I was 15 years of age, but my education really began after I left school on the streets of the Bogside, listening to the debates, listening to the articulation of all of the injustices that have been heaped upon the nationalist, pro-Irish Catholic community since Ireland was partitioned. And that had a major educational effect on me.
You and Republicans habitually call for a truth commission. Would you ever tell a truth commission were it established tomorrow? Would you put down in writing the number of soldiers you killed or police officers?
Well, let me say, you're making presumptions.
You're not denying them.
Well, I am denying them.
You didn't kill anybody?
You're making presumptions.
But did you ever kill anyone, Martin?
Well, there you're inviting me to sensationalise this.
No.
Oh, indeed you are. Well, my view is that you are. And I think that you, better than anybody else, as a very experienced journalist, knows that if I answer that in the way that you would hope I would answer that, that would become the headline. And I think that's a mistake because I am very conscious of the role that I am playing within what is seen as one of the most important peace processes in the world today. And I want to contribute on an ongoing basis to doing that in a very positive
I think that's very widely
and constructive way.
I think that's widely respected.
And I don't think I should be involved in anything which is about sensationalising what happened during my time when I was in the IRA.
Okay. Let me ask you something, because we all have to live with this, because maybe I knew too much as a practitioner of journalism in Northern Ireland. So we all have to examine our conscience and reflect on where we were. Have you in your head repented for what you deemed might have been your wrongdoings? You're being a member of an organisation which killed people. Have you repented or reconciled with God about that?
Well, I think I answered that question earlier. I was proud to be a member of the IRA. I am still 40 years on, proud that I was a member of the IRA. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and sit here and say something different.
Now, you became a very central person, Martin McGuinness, in the peace process. Was that an evolutionary situation, or did it just happen?
The reality is that I was always political. When I was in the IRA in Derry in 1972, I was political. I was there for political reasons. Now, obviously, we had this vicious cycle of conflict where many people on all sides were losing their lives, and which, if something politically had not been done about it to bring that to an end, would still be continuing to this day, even as we sit here. No, but let me continue on, because this is very important. Because I think that, everybody, if they're serious about politics, and if they're serious about trying to make people's lives better, have to consistently challenge themselves as political activists about how they can do that. And the run into the late 80s and the early 90s, I did read a number of theses that were written by very senior generals in the British Army for various universities in England. And the common theme that ran through all of them was that they all conceded that they couldn't militarily defeat the IRA. And an awful lot of IRA people were very happy about that, And an awful lot of Republicans all over the island thought, this was a great thing. Because what it did do, it showed, if you like, in one regard, some sort of respect that they had for the military capabilities of the IRA. But for me, it posed a bigger question. And the bigger question that it posed for me was, well, if that's what the senior generals in the British Army believe, what do Republicans believe about its ability to defeat the British Army? And if the answer to that was, similar, then we were effectively considering a conflict that would go on for many more decades. And so something had to be done to break the vicious cycle of conflict.
Okay. You overtly, publicly said in the Savile inquiry you were number 2 in Derry during Bloody Sunday. So you've publicly stated you were in the IRA, you've made no apologies for being in the IRA, you said you were proud of being in the IRA repeatedly during this interview. What is inhibiting Gerry Adams to stand up manly and say, yes, I was in the IRA? Why perpetuate what is deemed to be a lie by most people who live here, who know the facts?
Well, I think a bigger issue is made of that by the media than the public make of it. The reality is that Gerry has said he wasn't in the IRA.
But you don't believe that.
And I accept.
Do you believe that?
I accept Gerry's statement. The important thing is that I've come here to talk about me.
I know that. Do you not accept that the denial, the ongoing denial, is in fact damaging to the standing of Gerry Adams in the broader community?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to talk about Gerry Adams, but I'm going to say that, for example, if someone out there today stood up and said that he or she was a member of the IRA in 1985 or in 1989, they conceivably could be arrested.
Why aren't you arrested?
And brought before court.
Why aren't you arrested?
Well, I tell you why I wouldn't be arrested. I wouldn't be arrested because people who went to the Bloody Sunday Tribunal had immunity. Right. Now, on foot of me going to the Savile Tribunal, you were second in command of the IRA in Derry. But by the time the media get hold of that, you're actually second in command of the IRA everywhere. Our political opponents say it all the time. And they try to attribute everything that happened down the years to me. And that was one of the downsides of going to the Bloody Sunday Tribunal. But I'm still glad I done it, because I done it out of loyalty to my neighbours, to the people of Derry, and more importantly, to the memory of the 14 people who were murdered by the British Parachute Regiment.
Are you at peace with yourself at this stage in your life?
I think the work of the last 20 years has been transformative in terms of both the security and the political situation. I would like to think I've made my own small contribution to all of that. You know, where we are now is a far better place than where we were 20 years ago. And if we keep this going, where we'll be 10 years from now, we'll be a far better place than where we are at the moment.
Are you surprised at the level of warmth visited upon you from within the Protestant Unionist community in Northern Ireland?
No, it doesn't surprise me, because I think that there are very many very generous people within the Unionist community who have a very clear understanding of what happened here, of how young people like myself became involved in the conflict. And if you look at the fact that people had an opportunity during the course of the referendum into the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 to go for a new future, a new peaceful future between all of us. The vast majority of Unionists opted for that. Some didn't. Some supported a party that wasn't prepared to support the Good Friday Agreement. But I mean, some of the strongest friends that I have, throughout what has been a very difficult process, come from the Protestant churches and from the Protestant community. And I mean, Ian Paisley, for example, a lot of criticism at the time whenever I said in the aftermath of his death that I had lost a friend. Ian Paisley and I, not alone did we develop a positive working relationship, we actually developed a friendship that lasted to the day he died. And I give great credit to his wife Eileen, who I think, as much as Ian, played a very powerful role in the big decisions that were made by both Ian Paisley and Peter Robinson to come into government alongside Sinn Féin.
My very last question, Mark McGuinness. Does it ever occur to you that potentially your name is written on some bullet belonging to a former colleague within the Republican movement, given the presence of the dissidents still on our streets?
Well, what occurs to me is I get up in the morning, I go and do my work, I don't hide, I go to public events. The peace process is precious to me. If I worried about that, or if I was preoccupied about that, I would not go out the door in the morning. I go out the door every morning.
Martin McGuinness, thank you for being my guest on Irish TV.
Thank you, Eamon. Thank you.